All right. I think we're live. Cool. Welcome, everybody. My name is Pal. This is Conscientious Omnivore. And today I have a special guest with me. I have Ethologos, or Tim Jong-un, as he previously was called. And I'm really excited about this. If anybody was watching the live stream I did with Ellie just recently, we were actually talking quite a bit about Ethologos. And she kind of hinted at the thing that we're going to be talking about today. Because she asked me if I knew what you were kind of working on, and I said no. And then, sure enough, like it was like a day or two later, I saw the post on your Twitter, and that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. So I could see a couple people already in the chat. Welcome, everybody. Cool. Tofu Tommy's in. Shout out to Tofu Tommy. Tommy's great. Check out his channel. Kathy, hi Kathy. So with that, I think maybe just a quick couple words about yourself, Tim, and you have the floor.
Sure. My name is Tim. I'm on Twitter like way too often under the handle @Ethologos. I do a lot of work with animal sanctuaries, particularly Sail Ranch Animal Sanctuary. So if that's something you guys are interested in, please consider checking sailranch.org out. And other than that, I just like getting into arguments a lot with people on Twitter. That's basically what I do.
And as we talked about with Ellie, you are on Twitter quite a lot. So
yeah,
just for anybody who knows, like there's quite a bit of a time difference between us. So it's kind of my late afternoon / evening, and it's Tim's morning. And right. He already, like I was sending him a message this morning, my morning, and he was still replying. So he hadn't gone to bed yet. And here I am, like, and he's here. So
yeah, it's much to my wife's chagrin. She's like, she always knows what I'm doing. She looks over at me. She's like, "You're on Twitter, aren't you?" I'm like, "Yeah."
hard to put it down sometimes. And I think we're going to talk about that too, because yeah, I think it's just the way you engage with people, I find to be very sincere. So when I read your back and forth kind of discussions with people, I see a real like interest in actually getting across to people in a way that I don't see from a lot of other people. A lot of the people that I follow on Twitter, they're really good at posting kind of like really good stuff. But if somebody starts getting into it with them, they're kind of just, there's a lot of people who will just like out of hand dismiss or be very rude if they get rudeness. And with you, I feel that there's like a genuine kind of response where you're really trying to get across to people. So I think that's just it's a really, I don't know, kind of testament to your stick-to-itiveness or whatever. Like you really don't give up on people too easily. I think that's really
I don't, and Ellie will tell you, she's the best witness of this. When someone really gets my ire, they get the sass. They get the sass 100%, and it's because they deserve it. And usually when I'm sassy to people, I put a lot of thought into my sass too. Because when I'm sassy to people, I want it to be clever and funny and unique because I want it to sting a little bit. But I never go there until there's good justification for me going there. So yeah. I always try to take the Mr. Rogers approach to most of the conversations I get into.
Yeah, and I think we were talking about that a little bit before we went live, but I think that probably helps you to avoid burnout as well. Because I think if you get kind of too serious and too worked up about the people who are trolling or the people who are just being really kind of like nasty and mean with their kind of replies and comments, I think it's an easy way to burn out. So I think just for anybody, in your own activism, like kind of beware how far, somebody can rile you up, because I think there is kind of a limit at which you have to just realize the person is doing it to get a rise out of you. And if you've gotten to that point, then yeah, like feel free to, sass them back, as Tim just said, or or even like block. I think that's kind of healthy. I don't think that's like censorship per se. I think in my YouTube comments, I've only ever once reported somebody, even though people have come at me with like foul language or whatever. Like I don't really mind if somebody's swearing at me or whatever, but like if it's like beyond a certain threshold, then like then I reported it as abusive. But like I don't really block anything else. Like so. Yeah.
Right, me neither. There's a lot of things that people can say that other people in our camp get easily offended by that I don't necessarily get offended by, but I understand why they are. Like ableist slurs, and there's ableist slurs they don't offend me because I don't think they're actually being targeted at someone with a disability. They're being targeted who's behaving like as if they have a disability. So I don't think it's necessarily derogatory of a person with the actual disability. But I understand why other people would have the perception that it is. And by all means, they are more than welcome to report whatever they like. But recently I was getting into it with some girl who followed me from YouTube to Twitter, and then she got banned from Twitter. So she followed me back to YouTube. And I had since stopped arguing with this girl because it was hopeless. But she was making awful comments about my son. She was just saying terrible shit about how I'm an awful parent and my son's not going to grow right. He's going to have like growth problems and all this terrible shit. And I'm like, yeah, that's getting reported for sure, for sure. I'm not gonna let someone talk shit about my kid and just let it go off my back like water on a duck's back. Like, nope, not this one. No way. So, and she got banned for it. She got banned for a few things, and then she, of course, she came over to YouTube and blamed me for her getting banned. And I just kept saying, you know what? The best part is when you're super nice to them. After you get them riled up and angry, then you start being extra nice. So I just started saying, I love and respect you. Kisses. I just kept saying that over and over to her again. That nothing pisses them off more than being obscenely kind. That's the best way to get under their skin because it makes you look good, right? Because you're not stooping to their level. Yeah. And it just really annoys them because they're not getting you to stoop to their level. So every time she would say something awful to me, I just said, I love and respect you.
I think it's a best. Good way. You know, Tommy just said, be the vegan that you wish you had been, you know, or met before you were vegan. It's like, if you take the moral high ground, you can never kind of come out bad from that. So if you, if you do resort to kind of like name calling or just kind of going off the handle, like flying off the handle, then yeah, like you've kind of lost the, I don't know, kind of the moral high ground. So it's harder to like get your point across and then other people. And really, I think, you know, even sometimes with like the people who are just nasty, it's not so much that you're replying to them. So that's so important. It's that other people will see the kind of like exchange. And other people who are not extreme or haven't taken a position, it's for those people that we do these kind of things like the live debates or the kind of like back and forth with people. It's for the other people who are still not made up their mind and they're on the fence. And and I think some of the debates that I've had, you know, on this channel, you know, even the ones that I found to be kind of unpleasant, or one in particular that I can think of, like, I'm still glad I did it because I think there are still going to be people like all that person and that person's followers are going to think that they came out ahead and that they're like, you know, the greatest thing since sliced bread and I'm an idiot and whatever. But anyone who's on the fence, I think if they watch that, they're going to be like, oh, actually, you know, that pal guy seems all right. Like the other guy seems kind of weird. So, and that's what we're, you know, you're really trying to do is get across to as many people as you can because you can't get across to everybody. There are going to be some people who are just so made up in their minds that nothing you show to them is going to sway them. And I think that's a good intro to kind of what we want to talk about here. So if anybody's watching and doesn't follow Tim on Twitter and didn't hear kind of, you know, through the grapevine or from Ellie's fantastic video, there is a website by, well, I don't know if is it by Dr. Baker or former?
Oh yeah, it's his.
Yeah, it's his website.
Can you screen share by any chance?
And I will. Yep, and I've actually got it linked up here, so I will show you guys.
Yeah, if you go right to the about page because we can have a good laugh about this.
Okay, great.
Or if you want, go to my story first, I guess, since that's the jumping off point for this whole conversation because they've updated my story.
Okay. So I'm sharing my screen. Hopefully you guys can all see it. I just wanted to very quickly say I'll put all the links to this stuff. I think I already have it in the description, but I'll check it at the end if not. So Tim doesn't have any videos up currently on his YouTube, but if you want to subscribe, just go ahead anyway. Maybe it'll encourage him to do videos later. And then here is his.
I can give a quick explanation for why. The majority of my videos had to do with an organization I'm very close to, and I felt that the heat I'm going to get from getting under the skin of the collective carnivore community wasn't worth bringing that heat to the organization as well because they have nothing to do with this.
I see.
So that's why I have subscribers but no videos.
Okay. Well, maybe you'll do other kind of content in the future or something.
Yeah, I think I will. I think I will, but I got to put a lot of thought into it. Like I'm not like you and Ellie do such a great job at just being like prolific content creators that I want to do something different than what you guys are doing, and I'm not sure what that is yet.
Thank you. So anyway, so here's your Twitter page, and basically, yeah, like there is a website called Meat Heals, which is set up by Dr. or former Dr. Sean Baker, big carnivore diet supporter and kind of guru, and basically it has testimonials from people kind of explaining how they are healing themselves through going to a carnivore-based diet, and Tim basically wrote a false narrative on that site, a testimonial saying how he was vegan, and then he got like all these health problems, and then he switched to a carnivore diet and he healed himself, and it got posted to the site. So if you actually go to their website, I also think, it just as a quick aside, that it's funny that they're big into carnivory, but they have a very well seasoned with herbs.
I never noticed that. That's a great point.
It's pretty funny because, like, yeah, they're supposed to be all against the plants, so I don't know why there's so much seasoning on there, but
pal, if you really dig into it too, some of them debate about this, whether or not there should be any seasoning at all, like whether or not you should 100% forsake all plant material, no matter how minute it is. It's crazy.
The Jordan Peterson guy and his daughter, I think they are like that. They don't have anything on it except salt. I think that's the only thing they allow.
Just crazy.
Yeah. So basically, these are testimonials by people, and it's just all kind of, I mean, it's an anecdote, and we're going to talk about that and what that means specifically, but it's basically just a one-person story and how they're now, all of a sudden like feeling great and what have you. And then here is yours, Tim, a little bit further down. This is it, and here's the addendum that got added to the beginning. So you can see it in red here. If anybody can't read it, maybe it's small on the screen, I'll just read it. It says, "This story was revealed to be fake, submitted by a dishonest and dishonorable vegan who wished to undermine the carnivore community's sharing of observations and experiences." And that's really kind of what I wanted to talk about today. Tim, do you want me to show anything else on this site or on your site before we kind of switch back to just regular video?
We can switch back to video for now while we talk about it. There is other things that later on I'm going to want to show you, just because I think we'll have a good laugh about it. But
okay, cool. I stopped sharing, so we should be back on video now.
So there's a few things like in that like shows that either they're willfully not understanding the argument I'm making, which I think is the case, or they're really just not getting the argument I'm making. But I think they're smart enough to know what argument I'm making. I am not trying to undermine any individual person's experience at all. I even say as much in my initial thread. Like, I don't mean to say anything. I think anyone who experiences health improvements on their health journey, no matter how they got there, is a good thing, even though I think it's a bad thing that it might come at the expense of an animal's life, right? So I'm not trying to denigrate people for trying to just get their health back, however they see fit to do that. I hope that we can work together and find a way to do it that doesn't cause a victim, of course. But I'm not trying to if you have some serious health issues and you stopped eating all plants and you went to only eating animals and you improved your health, I think the fact that you improved your health is a great thing. I think the fact that you're going to have to kill a shitload of animals to do that is awful, right? So to say that I'm just trying to undermine their collective experience or observations is obscene. It's completely inaccurate. It doesn't describe what I'm attempting to do here at all. Then they also say that I'm dishonest and dishonorable. Well, yeah, technically it was dishonest, and I admit as much in my thread. I even apologize for the deception, right? I wrestled with the ethics of lying to make my point. But I ultimately felt that the benefit of making my point outweighed the detriment of lying or the ethic of lying. But to say I'm dishonorable for it, I find to be absurd, given the fact that Dr. Baker is their figurehead. That guy is absolutely dishonorable. There's no question about it. He lost his medical license for failure to report an adverse action taken by a medical entity and incompetence. And we don't know the exact details of what he did because he was smart enough to just surrender his license. If he hadn't surrendered his license, they would have done a further investigation and this would be more of public record. I'd love to know what he actually did. But what I often like to tell people is there is another doctor in the carnivore community who's also had a hold put on his license by the name of Dr. Berry. Now, I want you to keep in mind while I explain this that Dr. Berry has gotten his license back. Dr. Baker has not gotten his license back. Dr. Berry was, when they investigated his clinic, they found out he had a refrigerator that had unlabeled urine samples, unlabeled immunizations in a refrigerator together with food. He was using single-use trocars, which is a device used to do micro injections. Single-use trocars, he was using them multiple times on patients. So these devices that should get thrown out after he uses them, he used them multiple times, which was a violation of HIV precautions, right? That was ultimately why he had a temporary hold put on his license, because he was basically posing the threat of HIV, among other infectious diseases, to his patients. It's disgusting. They found that he was prescribing his family and friends prescriptions. He was self-prescribing clonidine, which is a sedative. I mean, the guy, he didn't have an autoclave, so even when he was doing, and I don't know if you know what an autoclave is, but an autoclave is basically a device that's used in a lot of clinics to sterilize equipment. It's high steam, it's high pressure steam. It kills everything. And he didn't even have one. So the way they were doing their sterilization techniques were subpar to begin with. So not only were they reusing single-use devices, they had subpar sterilization techniques, right? So they were really putting patient health at risk. Yeah. And his excuse, and this is another trend among these carnivore doctors, is they never hold themselves accountable for their actions. Dr. Berry tried to say that the manufacturer of these trocars told them they were multiple use. Why in the hell would a manufacturer of a device that's single use tell you that it's multiple use? They'd sell less devices that way.
Yeah,
of course,
there's no way that makes sense.
No, it doesn't. But that's his argument. That's his excuse. This guy got his license back. This guy still has a practice. So what the heck did Dr. Baker do? Like, I mean, the guy is dishonorable, and the fact that they call me dishonorable, I find laughable. I find it absolutely laughable.
And we also have to point out that you yourself basically brought it up and came to, like you kind of announced yourself that you had done this.
Right.
So it's not like they found you out and then you somehow sneakily, because you didn't gain anything by it. If anything, if you didn't out yourself, you would have basically been adding like the +1 to their kind of like list of testimonials. Right. So if anything, you would have been helping them with your testimonial. It makes no sense for them to call you dishonorable for posting it like that.
I think I'm helping them either way, right? Because here's the thing. First of all, I wrote this testimonial in August. By the time January rolled around, I thought it was never going to get posted. I thought, okay, maybe they do do a little bit of a better job at scrutinizing these testimonials than I thought, because I assumed they would post anything that I write as long as it confirms their bias. That was my presumption, and I was right. But
it just took a while. Maybe he had a backlog to go through.
Right, but by the time I got like a few months into it, waiting for them to post it and checking like once a week or once every 2 weeks, I thought that maybe they have a better system of scrutinizing these things, and this didn't pass their bullshit detector, and so that would have increased my opinion of their website. I still would have thought it was a garbage website, but it would have definitely increased my opinion, because I would have thought, okay, they don't post everything that you send to them that confirms their bias. So if that was the case and they never posted it, no one but me would have ever known of this story. No one. They did this. I didn't do this. I didn't make them press the publish button. They chose to do that. They decided that if it confirms their bias, we post. That's their operating system that they're on. I did not make them do that. They did that. Now, I've helped them in a way, because the fact that they posted this and then I revealed to them that it's fake is now going to make them in the future scrutinize the stories they get, right? It's going to be way harder to post a fake story there now, or at least it should be. I hope it will be. And because of that, their claims are actually going to be more valid than before, because they're going to have fallen under closer scrutiny. So I did them a favor, and they don't see it that way at all, of course, because they don't want to hold themselves accountable for their fuck up. And I apologize for swearing, but
that's right. I'm not monetized.
Okay. They don't want to hold themselves accountable at all, and it seems to be a trend among these carnivore doctors and many people among the carnivore community. It seems to be a trend of a lack of accountability and a lack of self-awareness.
See, this actually is why I wanted to talk to you about this, because when I first read it, my initial reaction, we talked a little bit before we went live about what a person's initial reaction is to something. My initial gut reaction when I saw that you had done this, I was like, oh my God, this is horrible. Like I was like really against it. And I had this like gut reaction that I think it was like, like, yeah, like you're helping them in a way because you kind of gave them one more testimonial that I think a lot of people, if they just read that and maybe they didn't read any follow-up or they didn't know that it was a fake, like they would just be like, oh, and there was that other guy, he had those problems too, and you know, maybe it'll help me. So like I was kind of concerned that, like, you know, that there are going to be more people maybe persuaded to do this. But then when I kind of read the whole thing and went through your reasoning and also saw the effort and the length that you went to basically explain the whole thing and to bring light to it. So, I mean, you know, I mean, it's obvious, like they all know about it, like the people in the carnivore community. And then I thought, okay, that will probably negate any kind of negative. If anything, people who are kind of on the fence and considering it, I mean, obviously now they have the red text there. They see that it's a fake. They can, again, make their own judgment about whether they think that's being dishonest or not, or dishonorable. And so I kind of like, you know, changed my mindset on it. But when I first saw it, I really was like, oh man, you know, like I'm not happy that Tim did this. I don't think it's a good idea. But I think, you know, this is what I want to talk about. Like, I also have a personal pet peeve about this, that it seems like everyone that so far that I've debated in real life or on YouTube, that is like kind of staunchly anti-vegan. And I'm not talking about somebody who's on the fence or just doesn't even know about veganism or doesn't even, you know, they're just kind of learning or interested. But I mean, the people who are like really anti-vegans, in my experience, every single one of them has all been about the anecdotes. They don't want to read studies. They don't want to see like actual scientific thought and literature and you know, thought process. They're literally all about these kind of anecdotes. People in my own experience, like family, friends who are kind of like anti-vegans, like anytime I've ever talked to them, their response to kind of like veganism or health concerns or anything is they'll send me an article written by somebody who's a blogger, and it'll just explain about how they had, you know, this health problem or that problem, and then they started eating animal products and then they were healed miraculously, and you know, veganism is bad. End of story. They don't want to read about anything. They don't want to see anything. And so I think like when I read your thing and, you know, started thinking about like kind of where I am and the people that I've talked to, both on YouTube here and just in real life, I realized like, yeah, this is a really important topic, and I'm really glad you raised it, because so many people don't understand kind of the scientific rigor of like an actual controlled study with like a, you know, placebo controlled, double blind, et cetera, versus just like somebody telling a story. Right. And yeah, so I mean, if you want to respond to that, like,
well, yeah, because the claims, I've been trying to come up with some good analogies, because I usually use the analogy of someone who, there's a preponderance of people who say they have experienced ghosts, right? They swear they've seen a ghost or they've experienced a poltergeist. Perhaps they have. I'm not going to make a definitive claim on whether or not ghosts are true, because I'm careful not to do that. But for anyone to extrapolate from these preponderances of anecdotal experiences of ghosts to make the claim that ghosts exist is a flawed conclusion, right? Just because a bunch of people experienced this thing doesn't mean that ghosts exist. Now, people take exception to that analogy, and I understand why, because people have very real health outcomes when they go on a meat-only diet. Like, these people aren't all lying or making up their experiences. Some people are going on a meat-only diet and they're having health benefits. This is like, we can't deny that. To deny that would be folly. But there are people who go to faith healers. I was listening to, do you know who Aaron Ra is?
No.
He's a big YouTuber who talks a lot about evolution and phylogenetics, and he debates atheism all the time. He debates against Christians mostly, for atheism, often. And so he was on the Atheist Experience, Matt Dillahunty's radio program, and a caller called in talking about how his wife went to a faith healer, and the faith healer healed his wife's fibromyalgia. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with fibromyalgia, but we don't really know what the underlying cause of fibromyalgia is. Fibromyalgia is just, you feel pain all over your body all the time. It's just constant pain all over your body. It's awful. It's an awful, awful condition. And we really don't have a clue what the underlying mechanism for it is. It could just be completely psychosomatic, right? He went to a faith healer, and his wife's fibromyalgia miraculously went away. Does that prove faith heals? Absolutely not. It does not prove anything about faith healing. It just proves that his wife had an experience that was unique to his wife, and we don't know what the underlying cause is. That's it. So all these people who are going to meatheals.com to read these anecdotes and hearing these people's stories, well, what you're hearing is a preponderance of people who happen to have gone on a meat-only diet, and then after doing that, positive outcomes ensued. That might be because of a number of reasons. Least of all, meat heals. I think meat is the least likely reason for that. I think it's much more likely that either A, they're experiencing the placebo effect, which there are some fascinating studies about the placebo effect. You can give someone, and don't anyone quote me on this because I don't have the studies available. Just try to do your own research and look it up for yourself. But I read studies that suggest that you can actually give people a placebo, tell them it's a placebo, and they could still potentially have positive health outcomes just because they're doing something positive for their health by taking the placebo, doing something on a routine.
Yeah, and when people don't know, that's an absolute accepted thing in the community, and that's why you have the placebo-controlled studies, because people know that affects a certain number of people. And this is why when they're evaluating drugs, they have to test it against the placebo, because sometimes the placebo has just the same effect as the actual drug, and then you realize, okay, well, if you're just giving them a sugar pill that actually shouldn't do anything, then your drug is worthless. Right.
Exactly. There was another study I read where they were giving some people some sort of immunosuppressant. And I can't remember what the biomarkers they used to measure its efficacy, but let's just assume it was like they were doing a titer test for like antibodies. So they'd give you an immunosuppressant, then they'd see if the antibodies for that immunosuppressant were present in your body, suggesting that they've improved your immunity to some sort of pathogen. Then they took a group of the people, stopped giving them anything, and they measured their biomarkers. The immunosuppression dropped. They took another group of people, kept giving them the immunosuppressants. Their immunosuppression stayed steady. Then they took a third group of people, gave them placebos, and their immunosuppression stayed steady like the people who were on the immunosuppressants. That's amazing. That means you can just be told this is going to be good for you, and your body can actually have immunological effects. That blows my mind. That blows my mind, because that just speaks to the power of the human mind for healing itself. So the first thing that could be the causal factor behind these people on meat-only diets could be the placebo effect. After that, it could be an elimination of some sort of triggering food. Who knows what that might be? When you eliminate an entire massive food group, the plant food group is way larger than the meat food group. When you eliminate that entire food group, you've probably also eliminated whatever was causing you problems. So you didn't really figure out what the problem was or what was causing you issues, but you got rid of it, and now you're attributing it to meat when meat might not have anything to do with it at all. Another reason could be caloric deficient, going on. I'm having a moment here.
A caloric restriction. Yeah, they're losing a bunch of weight. They're gaining health benefits because of the lost weight. Yep.
Right. Even if they're not necessarily overweight when they begin, they might be overweight relative to what's an ideal body, a BMI for them. But not what we would traditionally consider overweight. And so they might think, well, I wasn't really overweight, but I did lose a couple pounds, and that's because of the meat. No, it's because you're probably eating less calories because you're going on a restrictive diet. Who wants to eat ribeyes 3 times a day, right? I know people do it, which blows my mind, but who's doing that and enjoying it every single day, day in and day out, over and over and over and over again? And it gets to a point where your meals get so boring that of course you're going to eat less. You know, I get to eat all these different pastas and these soups and these, all this different stuff. So it's all new. Every single day I'm eating something new and different and exciting. They're eating pretty much the same stuff over and over and over again. And of course they're going to eat less as a result.
If you've read interviews with Jordan Peterson and his daughter, they both say that they hate being on the diet. They find it incredibly boring. They miss all the stuff that they kind of enjoyed eating previously and all this kind of stuff. So you're absolutely right. And I remember years back, I actually read, it was like a diet book. It was called the Abs Diet Book. It was put out by the guys who run the Men's Health magazine. And I remember a thing in there that they talked about kind of restriction diets. And they said, look, I can design a diet for you that, you can only eat foods that start with the letter P and you could lose weight. Because as long as you make it restrictive enough, and you just make something in your mind that's easy enough to remember. Like, okay, it's a peanut, I can eat that because it starts with the letter P. It's whatever, you know, papaya, I can eat that because it starts with, you can make it so restrictive that it's just, you're going to inherently be, you know, finding that you lose weight. And this is what they even said in that book about kind of like these, you know, fad diet, low carb, you know, whatever Atkins style diets that, like, yeah, they work because of the calorie restriction. There isn't anything inherently magical about that. And I think that's what a lot of these health benefits that they see are. And for some people, I would go the other direction, is that they might not be getting enough calories. There are some of these people that I see that, you know, they're losing weight on a kind of, you know, vegan diet, especially like there's a lot of people who are like raw vegan diet and they're just not getting enough calories. And then all of a sudden they start eating really calorie dense foods compared to, say, like potatoes or
and their energy levels go up. Yeah. Oh, totally.
Exactly.
I see people eating the zucchini pasta, like the spiralized zucchini. And I'm like, that's all well and good, but there's no calories in that at all. You're not going to get sufficient energy if you're eating this stuff all the time. You're better off just eating the processed carbohydrate pasta. You are, because at least then you're getting the actual calories that you need. It's much more important to have enough energy than it is to have the right nutrients. You need to have both, ideally.
Absolutely, because long term you can get problems. But let's face it, most people, it's not a deficiency from nutrients that it's causing the problems. Usually it's either too much of something or just not enough energy.
Right. Exactly. So I take exception to them saying that I am trying to dismiss people's experience or observations. I'm not trying to dismiss anything. What I'm dismissing is the claim, the absolute claim, the explicit claim from the title of the website that meat heals. Saying that and then listing all the, if you look at their categories, it's absurd. They have addiction listed, PTSD, relationships. I mean, gee whiz, meat really is a miracle. It's amazing that how, you know, we've been eating so much meat in this society for so long. It's amazing that we ever had any problems to begin with, right? Because how did people get into these? It's just nuts to me that people think that if you believe that meat healed your PTSD or relationships and you were previously eating meat, just in addition to plants, then you have to believe that plants are causing your relationship problems or PTSD. Like it's insane. It's nuts. And I'm not blaming the individuals sharing their own experience. I'm blaming the doctor who is promoting this stuff for clout so that he can sell his carnivore training system to unsuspecting people who are just trying to get their life back, to get their health back. They're desperate, and he's preying on desperate people. And yet I'm the dishonorable one. And I find it absolutely obscene that he would suggest that I am trying to dismiss people's observations and experiences. I did nothing of the sort, and I was clear in my original post to say that I'm not. That's not what I intend to do. I don't intend to denigrate anyone who was able to heal themselves any way they were able to do it. It's not my goal. Never was. My goal is to say that saying that meat heals is as a statement of fact is absurd, and it's an affront to my scientific sense. So, and I'm not a scientist, so I feel bad for the real scientists out there who see this shit. They must groan. It's the same thing with the anti-vax community, right? I understand why people would attribute vaccines to their child having certain issues, right? I can understand why they would do that, because that's traumatizing to watch your child, you know, have some sort of health issue that you can't do anything about, and you want to find something to blame it on. I totally get where you're coming from, and I don't think you're a bad person, but you can't conclude that from your experience, therefore vaccines are bad or unhealthy. And that's what people do. It's no different. And I even analogized it like this. Imagine if Dr. Greger lost his license to practice due to incompetence because he failed to report an adverse action taken from a medical entity. Then he went and he started, instead of nutritionfacts.org, he started a site called berriesheal.com. And then it was just a preponderance of anecdotes of people saying berry healed their PTSD or healed their asthma or healed their relationships. Berries do all these amazing things, right? And then in addition to that, Dr. Greger had a website called the Berry Training System, where he sold you for one flat fee of $147. He would teach you how to, you too can learn how to eat berries and nothing else. Like it's crazy. It's nuts. I mean, this guy is so obviously a con artist. He's not even a con artist. That's an insult to artists. He's a con man.
Yeah.
He's an absolute con man and people are falling for it, and I want to help them not fall for it. I don't want to tell them to stop pursuing whatever health journey they need to pursue. I mean, I would like to tell them that, but that was not the purpose of this thread. I would like to tell them to pursue a health journey that doesn't come at the consequence of other sentient beings, but that was not the purpose of this thread. This purpose of this thread was to help these people, at least in some of them who haven't been caught in this trap yet, to help them safeguard themselves against the folly of trusting in anecdotes. Yeah. Especially when someone has something they want to sell you behind it. And he does.
And I think the thing is that most people that are prone to kind of falling for this kind of logic, they're the similar kind of people who will look at something like climate change, and they will just look at only anecdotes. Well, I mean, we got a lot of snow here this winter, so clearly there must be no climate change or whatever. Just something where it's like localized, or it's like just something that they remember or in their childhood, or just something that is specific. And it's the same kind of thing. And then they also kind of are the same kind of people who will throw up their hands when faced with like scientific kind of rigor, or kind of like reading about studies, where they'll just say like, but who knows? Because look, there's this one doctor who says this, and the other doctor says this. And so they don't realize like, okay, well, there might be, let's say, 10 doctors who say this, but there's 10,000 doctors who say this. Like, I'm not saying trust in numbers absolutely, and I'm not using that as the justification, but like, you have to kind of at least say, okay, but there's so many more people who are giving this. Like, there has to be some kind of weighting of the information. Like, you can't just take it at like, well, one guy says this and the other guy says that, so who knows? They could be both wrong. And it's like, well, yes, but you do have to be a little bit more careful with that, Right. And I think these people aren't. They're just kind of like, I got like this story, that guy had the same symptoms as me, I'm sure it'll be just as good for me.
Right. And they think that because I had an experience similar to this guy's experience, that means our conclusions from that experience must be true. And that's not the case. And it's funny because a lot of these same people will outright reject epidemiology, but they accept anecdotes. It makes no sense to me. And the thing is with science, you can't prove causality definitively in anything, right? Like, just to give you an example, all science attempts to do is establish probability. What's most likely going to happen? Nothing in science is 100% ever. It never will be. We can't do that. It's not possible. For instance, I could drop a ball 1 billion times, right? I could drop a ball 1 billion times, and every single time I drop that ball, the ball will fall to the ground due to gravity. That doesn't mean 1 billion plus 1 times it's going to fall. It means it's probably going to fall. It means the chances of it going to fall is extraordinarily high, but it doesn't mean it will with 100% certainty, because nothing in science is 100% certain. And so when people want to introduce the fact that there's just one thing out of 50 or 500 or 5,000, there's one thing that's counter to what is collectively agreed upon, well, then they're throwing probability out the window. And I would never go, I would absolutely want to play poker with that person.
Yeah. And if you think about it, like, there's so many examples of like drugs that get tested, they go through clinical trials, they get approved. There could be, potentially millions of people using it without any kind of like adverse effect. And then there could be that one person who gets like some crazy reaction to it, and they could die or get some horrific like side effect. Right. And even that is like, it can still happen. It's the same thing you said. Like, just because the 9,999th person took it and it was fine, the 10,000th person might still have, kind of a problem. Right. And I think these people just don't really think they don't really understand kind of how this works. I know in Ellie's video, she showed the little triangle of the hierarchy of scientific, thing. Right. Maybe I'll actually like share my screen and show that, just to kind of get people to see. Let me just and people I was arguing with, I was actually posting that for them and asking them to tell me where they think Meat Heels lands on it. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. Which one is Meat Heels in? It's clearly in the one that's the circle. Yep. That's where Meat Heels would go. So if anybody can't see it, I mean, hopefully you can see it on the screen, but there's basically like a pyramid of kind of the hierarchy of scientific evidence. So at the bottom you have case reports, and really case reports are a collection of the anecdotes, in a scientific kind of more rigorous way. So it's like if a doctor notices a trend among his patients, like he could maybe write up some case reports that could be, kind of that bottom part. The next thing is the animal trials and in vitro studies. That's where you take like, maybe even human cells, you put them in a petri dish, you put some kind of antioxidant on it, you check it against cancer, stuff like that. Then you have the cross-sectional studies where you're looking at like actual people in the population. You have the case control studies, the cohort studies, randomized control, those are actually much higher up. So, and then you have the meta-analysis where you're looking at multiple randomized control trials. And, this is the thing that I think most, oh, sorry, I had the mouse over the thing. And so, the thing here on the right is what Tim just said. That's the Dr. Sean Baker videos telling you like eating steak is good for you because it healed his acne or whatever. Or I can deadlift, 500 pounds for reps and therefore I'm smart. Like it has nothing to do with anything. And that is not, that's not scientifically rigorous to say the least.
And that guy has to peddle conspiracy theories. I don't know if you like, once I knew I was going to post this stuff live, I decided to follow him on Instagram so I could see if he was saying anything specifically about this, which he's mostly quiet about it because I think he knows he has egg on his face. But one of his live videos came up just last night and I was like, I'm going to pop in and see what this idiot's talking about. And he's been in a conspiracy theory. The vegans are coming to get us. We got it. It's the time is now. The time is now to fight back. Like he's trying
the vegan resistance. Yeah.
It's constantly a rallying cry with him, and it's like he has to have this conspiracy theory because he knows he doesn't have the science. That's it. And that's why I'm not too worried about people like him. I'm worried about the people affected by him. I'm not worried about him. I'm worried about the people who are harmed by him in his wake of destruction, in pursuit of his of notoriety, clout, and ultimately money. That's what he's after, right? Yep. He's not trying to promote people's health. He didn't start doing this stuff until after he lost his license to practice. He's after money, and that's my opinion, obviously, but I think the case for that's pretty strong. So actually, now since you brought up that whole thing about the pyramid, maybe now's a good time for us to go back to the meatheals.com website. Sure. Yep. So I can show you what they consider scientific resources.
Yep. Okay, so I'm back on Meat Heals here. Do you want me to go to the
top?
All right,
so just go to the About page. Okay, so see where it says for scientific resources on carnivory? Click that link. This is what they consider scientific resources. This is great. You're going to get a good kick out of this. Just go on the right side. Just scroll down through the right side through the Twitter pages and the YouTube pages.
Yep.
Go to the YouTube pages. You're going to die.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, Frank Tufano. I love it.
Sparage is on this.
Sparage. Oh, my God.
Oh, my God. It's insane. But look, these are supposed to be scientific resources. I don't think I saw, when I went through this, and I've only done a precursory glance through this, I don't think I've seen a single, I mean, look how many Amazon links there are. This isn't a website trying to give information. This is a website trying to sell you bullshit. And,
holy cow, man. This is crazy.
Like,
I mean,
this is
the views expressed by Sparage alone should be scary enough that you would never want to be associated with him if you're trying to be any kind of like legitimate kind of source of anything. I mean, his views on rape and, other kinds of things like incest and murdering people and cannibalism. I mean, those alone should hopefully in any normal rational debate kind of disqualify the guy. And the fact that he's kind of listed here as a proud, whatever. I mean,
and this is like, look how many of these are just going to be anecdotes. My 0 carb life. That's an anecdote. Like all of these things are anecdotes. And even when they do try to actually get a scientific argument behind them, like I think I clicked on one link that went to a ResearchGate. So at least it went to like a peer review site, but it wasn't, all it did is it went to a guy's body of work. It didn't actually go to any links that had anything to do with meat healing. So they don't actually prove anything. These aren't scientific resources for carnivory. This is just a bunch of resources so that you can pursue a carnivorous diet. Nothing about it is scientific, though, right? They even have on here how to butcher an entire pig, how to butcher an entire lamb. How is that science? What does that have to do with science? Why would you even refer to this website as a scientific resource? It's insulting. Yeah. And one of the best ones, like I think it's on the left side. Yeah, under high stakes, under the high stakes, go to carnivore versus omnivore versus herbivore chart.
Yeah.
This is just a perfect example of pseudoscience. So it's pretty obvious what they're trying to promote here, highstakes.com. But if you look at this comparison chart, they've taken a monogastric human, traditionally an omnivore, they compared it to a monogastric carnivore, and then they compared that to a ruminant herbivore. This is not a valid comparison. If they wanted a valid comparison, they should have compared a monogastric omnivore to a monogastric carnivore to a known monogastric herbivore, a primate. What they should have done is all three primates. They should have compared three primates. But they didn't. They don't want to do that. They have a narrative they're trying to push. So they put together this ridiculous chart as if it proves anything, but people fall for it. People who don't know any better fall for it. They think,
I get this linked to me in Twitter in discussions. I see this all over the place. I'm sure you have too.
Oh, dude, I see meatheels.com all the time. People send me meat heels, which is what sparked this whole thing. So yeah, I see stuff like this too. And I just then I have to explain. And this is one of the things about being on Twitter that we were kind of talking about. You get burnout because you end up arguing against the same argument a million times, and you start to get exasperated with people because you've dealt with this a million times, but this is the first time they've dealt with you, and this is the first time they've dealt with someone. So you got to kind of remember this is the first time this person's heard it. And it's hard to do that. It's really hard to remind yourself of that because it's like, oh, for God, oh, fuck's sake, I have to deal with this again. I have to explain to another person why this chart's ridiculous.
Absolutely. It's super frustrating. And the fact that they think that it's scientific, because it kind of looks scientific. It's like a bunch of links, and it looks kind of like impressive. There's a lot of stuff on here. And if you don't know about how many of these people that are listed here have already been, discredited, like Nina Teicholz, Alan Savory, all these people. Like, I mean, I've seen so many things. Yeah, Professor Noakes. I mean, this guy's also been kind of threatened with, I think he's,
he was found innocent. It was South Africa. He was found innocent of whatever it was he was accused of. So I'm going to presume his innocence. Like, maybe he wasn't. Maybe he should have been found guilty of something. Maybe he should have been found guilty of negligence or of giving bad medical advice. I will follow the judgment of the court of South Africa and presume his innocence. But that doesn't mean he's not a charlatan, and that doesn't mean he's not just trying to sell books. The guy right above him, Travis Statham, I've gotten into arguments with him. He's recently blocked me because he was one of the fools who shared the fake story, and he didn't like it, so he blocked me. But I've argued with him on multiple occasions. And on one occasion, he was making the false claim that meat is what gave us the evolutionary growth of our brain. I gave him a peer-reviewed study that suggested it was not meat. It was starchy tubers in addition to meat. And even that isn't necessarily what did it. It could just be that the food security we had from starchy tubers enabled us to build settlements, which enabled us to focus on creating tools. Like, one of the things about the meat made our brain grow argument that's really silly is, if meat made our brain grow, then how did we know how to make the tools we needed to make to be able to get meat, right? Like, we had to have a brain grow to be able to know how to make tools to get the meat to begin with. So it's a bad argument. But he also made an argument which I found disgusting. I didn't even argue against him. I just said this is disgusting and went on about my day. He made the claim that people with cancer should be held accountable for getting cancer, because of the fact that it could be lifestyle choices that led to them getting cancer. Wow. Which I think is just insane. And there were so many people who got on his thread explaining to them that they have a genetic form of cancer, and he stood his ground. He's like, you don't think that still your lifestyle choices might have increased your risk of getting that cancer despite your genetic predilection for it? I'm like, this guy is a piece of garbage. Not only is he wrong, he's a piece of garbage because he's.
And think about that. Like, that same kind of logic can be extended to anything. I mean, like, you could extend it to any disease, any illness, about. I mean,
it does no good to blame the patient anyway. For one, incredible. and two, there's children with leukemia. You're gonna blame those kids, or you're gonna blame those kids' parents for those kids getting leukemia? We don't even know why kids get leukemia. We're still trying to figure that out. There's some amazing physicians and scientists who are making great strides in trying to figure that out. But how tragic is that to have a kid suffer leukemia? And even some of the people on the thread, one woman was sharing her story, and she was like, in the 13 years it's been since I survived cancer, this is the first time I've ever seen anyone try to make me feel guilty for it. It's insane. Shaming. And this is the kind of people they are. And I don't mean to lump all the people in the carnivore community with the likes of Travis, because he's exceptionally gross. And he does this for clout because he runs a Reddit page and all this stuff. He does it for clout. He likes the attention he gets as being the guy who runs the Reddit page or who has been in a newspaper article about his lifestyle choice. Like, he likes that attention. And so will continue to be shameless about it. But they're not all like this. In fact, one guy who shared the story before it was revealed to be fake actually wrote a post saying, it turns out this story was fake. All right, point taken. And he tried to make some arguments that I disagreed with after that, but at least he opened up by taking some accountability for the fact that he shared a fake story and that there was a legitimate point behind making the fake story. He's the only one who did it. One guy, and I wish I could remember his name, and kudos to him. Yeah. He made some arguments after that I really didn't like, and I took exception to, and we got into it a little bit, and we just had to end up agreeing to disagree. But at least he took some accountability. And the thing is they're trying to make this all about the fact that I'm a liar and B, a vegan, as if those two things are synonymous almost.
Yeah.
But it has nothing to do with it. Like, if you read my thread, I condemn vegans for doing the same shit. But the core of my point is that no one, and I've challenged a lot of people to do this and they refuse to do it. No one can provide me a comparable website where it's just a website of vegans sharing anecdotes with nothing else to support the claim that veganism heals. There's no such website that I know of that exists. If such a website does exist, I'll condemn that website too. I'll absolutely condemn that website too.
I actually want to talk about this point specifically because this was one of the things that kind of made me want to talk to you about this, is that I've been kind of, the recipient of people saying like, oh, you have a clear bias, you're a vegan. Mm-hmm. And what I want to point out to people that I think they often forget is that most vegans, I mean, there are some people who are born vegan because their parents were vegan, but most people were not vegan from birth. I mean, I spent 37 years of my life being an omnivore and being pretty anti-vegan, quite honestly. Mm-hmm. And it took a lot of time for me to actually consider the other point of view and to read the things that went counter to what I believed. And I actually spent a lot of time, a lot of books, a lot of videos read or watched, a lot of articles read, and tons of books and tons of research studies that I was actually reading through because I didn't want to accept it. I was literally, they were going counter to what I believed. Right. And when people were telling me like I didn't even want to accept that veganism can be as healthy. Like, forget that it's healthier. Like that was like beyond like what I could have believed. I just didn't even believe you could be healthy as a vegan, period. Like, that was the end of it. And then it took me, literally like weeks and weeks of like reading and learning before I even just accepted that it's a possibility. So for people to kind of have this view that like, you're biased because you're vegan, I think that really goes, it's really kind of like, it's just like discrediting a whole swath of people that have gone through a ton of effort to read and educate themselves on things that are counter to what they held to be true and near and dear to their hearts.
Right. And it's funny because I often get the comment that, are you even capable of seeing it from the other side? Like, and I get this from farmers a lot. And I'm like, yeah, actually I can. I have a degree in animal science that was focused in agriculture, and I've worked on cow dairy operations. I've worked on lamb operations. I've worked on pig operations. So yeah, I think I kind of have a good grasp of the other side.
Let me guess, that's when they block you and then move on.
Right. Well, I mean, a lot of them don't believe it. Like I don't even want to even get into this, but there's a lot of people who just don't believe me outright. They just think I'm making it up. And then I can, carry a conversation with them about really technical stuff. They don't like it when I, like, for instance, this is a good one, and a lot of vegans don't know about this, so I like to make them aware of it. A lot of people talk about artificial insemination from the female's perspective. We rarely talk about it from the male's perspective, but I know from firsthand experience how much worse it can be for the male, especially in the case of goats and lambs. But cattle get it just as bad, right? What they use, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but what they use.
I'm pretty sure I know what you're going to say, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So they have to do semen collection because just doing traditional breeding doesn't make sense. It would take too long. So they have to do semen collection. Now, they could use semen collection using something called an artificial vagina, but that's a lot more difficult to do with 100% results every single time. Like, you don't know, and it's more work. It's more dangerous for the people doing it. And it's for animals who have like, I don't want to talk too much about the anatomy of the penises of different animals, but like goats and lambs have like a strange kind of penis comparatively to cattle. And so it's a lot harder to do it with them. But with cattle, you can do it, but it's still not as efficient as what they normally do, which is to use a device called an electro-ejaculator. And what they do is they take a probe. This probe is enormous. It's like the size of your arm. And they stuff the probe up the cattle's anal cavity, and then they apply voltage. The voltage forces ejaculation, and it is painful. It is painful. They vocalize pretty much every time. There's no question about this. This is painful. And if you've ever seen it done to a goat, it's to a ram or to a buck, it's horrifying how painful it is. And it's even recommended that rams should be anesthetized, but they rarely are because anesthesia is also risky, right? Not only is it not cost effective, it's risky because you might use the wrong amount of anesthetic and it could cause the animal even more damage, right? Wow. So it's hard to gauge what the right amount of anesthetic is for these animals. And if you actually read the Wikipedia page about electroejaculation, it's done to humans too. For men who go into a sterility clinic, they'll use it because you can get a larger sample. But when they do it, men are anesthetized or sedated.
Wow.
So for anesthetizing us to do it, imagine what it feels like to this animal who has no clue what's going to happen to them. And when you bring that up to a farmer, they don't like that because they don't expect you to know about that shit. And I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand. I've helped it be done to animals before, and it's disgusting. It's awful. And it's because of my education that I went vegan. I was not vegan when I started my education in animal science. I was vegan 100%. I was a hardcore vegan by the time I was done. Hardcore, because I did all the shit that you hear about, like cutting the tail off the pigs, cutting the teeth out of the pigs, notching their ears, cutting their testicles out. I have done this stuff, and it haunts my dreams, and it will forever, and I hope it does. It should, because that motivates me to do better. But the fact of the matter is I do know about this stuff. So when they say, "Can you even understand the other side?" Yeah, I can understand it better than I'd like to. I wish I didn't understand it so well. And I was for years I've worked in restaurants as a chef, or a cook. I shouldn't say chef. That's being too generous. As a cook. And one of the restaurants I worked in was a steakhouse, and I loved it. I would go home with ribs all the time. I'd go home with fillets. I loved it. I loved that stuff. But I couldn't justify it anymore. And just like you, you figured this all out in weeks. It took me years. When I first went vegetarian, it was 100% for ethical reasons. No question about it. It was for ethical reasons. And I knew the whole time that the vegans had the moral high ground. What I didn't think was true was that veganism was healthy. What I didn't think, and it took me about 4 years to get to where I needed to be like, all right, I'm being kind of an idiot. I'm relying on a naturalistic fallacy because I think that it's better to get your food from natural resources instead of having to get it from supplements. I made that whole stupid argument for a long time. And I never argued against the ethics. I knew the vegans had the high ground. I was smart enough to know that much. And thank God I wasn't on the internet at this time.
There's all sorts of things that could be used against you. Yeah.
For sure.
Blackmail Ethologos. Like, you know.
So
I cringe at the things that I said to my friends. I mean, I had friends and coworkers and stuff who tried to come at me with like ethical veganism, and oh man, I mean, it's
I didn't have any of that. I wish I did.
I wrote emails to apologize to those people after becoming
vegan.
That's
great. See, that's good. How many people actually do that? And this actually brings me to another point I meant to make earlier, is when we were talking about like when you were saying how like you try to keep your cool and just make the best argument you can because for the audience's benefit. Well, all the time when I'm arguing with people on Twitter, they ask me, "What do you think you're going to get out of this? You're never going to convince me." And I go, whoa, you're completely missing my intent here. I know I'm never going to convince you. My goal is twofold. One, to demonstrate that you're holding logically inconsistent positions so that you're less confident in making these bad arguments in the future. And two, to convince the bystanders who are watching this exchange that maybe the vegan has the better argument than the non-vegan here.
Yeah. And think about that. The fact that he can or she can actually just say that explicitly, like, you're never going to convince me.
Right.
That already shows the closed-minded kind of like, I've got my mind made up.
Right.
No amount of science, no amount of studies, no amount of anything is going to change my mind. And that's like the worst thing you can possibly have.
Right.
And I mean, it's just that should alone kind of scare off some people. And hopefully it does.
I know. I think it does. I think there's some people like through the most I've heard about me having an impact on people with my arguments is through the ranch. Is like I will talk to people. I will talk to people at the ranch. So at the ranch, one of the things I do for them is I cook all their food for their big events. They have big events, and I cook a vegan feast for people. And that's the best way to get people in a mindset to listen to the arguments, because they're like, oh shit, this stuff's actually really good. This guy just made something that's not meat, that's really meaty. This guy is making all this great food. I guess I don't really need to eat meat to eat really well. And so now they're primed to listen to my argument, especially because they're also in front of the animals too. I mean, it's just a trifecta. We're hitting them with the good vegan food. They're in front of the animals. They're seeing these animals as individuals. They're hearing the animals' individual stories, and then I'm slapping them around with the logic and the facts about what we do to these animals, about what's going on with these animals, and why we don't need to do this. And that's for me been the most effective form of outreach. And I have actually gotten feedback from people through the CEO of the ranch telling me, like, that guy Tim convinced me to stop eating this stuff. And that's the best feeling in the world. That is the absolute best feeling in the world. I never expect it to happen through Twitter. I don't have any anticipation for it to happen through Twitter. If it happened through Twitter, I'd be amazed. I'd be ecstatic. I have that's not why I'm on Twitter at all. I'm on Twitter for the reasons I laid out, and also to have fun.
Yeah, I think honestly though, you'll probably see some people coming through Twitter giving you the same feedback at some point if you stick with it long enough. I mean, I haven't had that,
so, but I don't anticipate it.
I think it will, because it's really just, I think, kind of like almost like I don't know, just like it's just a question of time. There's a lot of people that I follow that have been on Twitter a lot longer than me. I've only been on like maybe about a year, or not even, probably half a year, and maybe it was a year. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And there are some people that I follow where they literally say, like, you know, oh, I never thought this would be possible and whatever. But then they give examples of like people messaging them and saying, like, hey, it's because of you that I started, you know, changing my mind and, you know, started considering it and all this kind of stuff. I've had a few people comment on my channel where they say, you know, they've been inspired to kind of like, you know, at least think about veganism or whatever. It's just, you know, I've convinced people in real life, like my coworkers, like, my brother became vegan. His family became vegan because of kind of my, you know, kind of thing. So it's like, it will happen. I think it's just a matter of time. And I think any place you can advocate, you know, for it using like sound, scientific logic, reasoning, you know, like philosophical kind of logical thinking, it's like, yeah, you're kind of bound to get people who are at least, like, I would say impartial, who don't have their mind made up, who aren't these closed-minded people. Because those people you might never change, like you say. But yeah, it almost doesn't really matter, because it's the other people that are on the fence. Those are the important people to reach. And once there's a critical mass, I think, you know, it almost doesn't matter if every single person adopts it or not, because there will be kind of a mainstream thing. I think within our lifetimes, you know, we'll either probably see the death of the earth, or we'll see kind of like the mainstream be vegan, and you'll have to go to a specialty you know, store or shop to buy, like, you know, animal products. That's what I think.
Right. Well, I made kind of a macabre post the other day where I was like, eventually everyone's going to be vegan, because at the rate we're going, we're not going to have any animals left. So, and
I'm
like,
not sure that we'll have people left once we start fighting each other over like basic things like water and like, you know, like dry land.
My follow-up post was, who am I kidding? There's going to be some idiot saying we need to eat humans to be healthy or some bullshit. But the thing is once we start going to space, and humans will eventually go to space, I hope, in my lifetime, I hope. But once we start going to space and actually colonizing space, those humans are likely going to be vegan. They're not bringing animals with them. They're not going to waste the resources on bringing animals with them. So those humans are almost certainly going to be vegan. Maybe eventually we'll get to the technology where we'll start shipping animals to other places. I hope not. I hope if we do ship animals to other places, it's for the animals' benefit, not for our benefit. It's to say, look, we've wrecked their ecosystem here. Now let's bring them to a place where we have land, where we can develop an ecosystem, where we can do terraforming. I mean, I'm getting kind of science fiction-y here, but
yeah, I know what you mean. And it maybe just for like the genetic diversity and kind of like for wildlife. I mean, that could be great. Yeah.
Right. So, but I do think like I argue a lot with farmers. I'm constantly arguing with farmers, and it's because I know I have the knowledge requirements to argue with farmers at the farmers' level of knowledge. And that's not to say I know as much as them, but I know enough to argue with them. And I have no assumption that I'm ever going to change a farmer's mind. That's never going to happen. These people's livelihoods depend on it. They need to come to this conclusion on their own terms.
I'll disagree with you. I just did a live stream, one of the news kind of live streams I did, where I highlighted a website where there's a list of farmers who have actually gone vegan. And a lot of them talk about kind of how they made the ethical connection when they just saw their animals, being brought to the slaughterhouse or, what have you. And
right.
You never know. You could put that little seed in their mind, and then they look at their animals just that slightly different way the next time they're out there.
Well, I hope so. I certainly hope. That's certainly my hope. It's just not my initial intent. That's not why I'm doing it. I don't go into an argument with, and I know like Howard Lyman, I reference Howard Lyman all the time because Howard Lyman, I mean, he's been vegan for, I think, almost 30 years now, because I'm pretty sure he went vegan around the time he was 50, after being a cattle rancher in, I think, Montana.
And multi-generational too, because like his whole family going all the way back, like whatever.
He went and actually got an agribusiness degree because he was so invested in the farm life that he wanted to, not only did he want to continue his family's farm, he wanted to be like the guy who was really doing it at a new level, and he was. I mean, his operation was enormous. He had like well over 1,000 head of steer, and he's been vegan now, I think, for over 25 years. That's insane. That's amazing. And I reference him all the time when talking to farmers. But nonetheless, my hope is that they go vegan, of course, but my intent's not to try to make them go vegan. My intent is that the people who follow them and who are listening to them for trying to get, because a lot of people go to the farmer to hear both sides, and they should. And I hope they go to the farmer to hear both sides, see the farmer's argument, and then see me absolutely obliterate it, because it happens all the time, because these farmers only speak from their experience and what they know about the animals. They haven't actually taken into consideration the philosophical and ethical arguments as much as they should have. And this was something I actually brought up when I was in college to my professors, because most of my professors were veterinarians, but many of them were also farmers. Some of them were both. They were veterinarians that worked specifically with livestock. And I'd bring it up all the time. I think there's a real problem about how we don't talk about the philosophy of what we're doing to these animals in these classes. And only one of my professors took my concerns seriously and actually addressed it. And I love her for it. And she's not a vegan. She's not even close. She's a veterinarian. She does wonderful work. She's a small animal vet. And I love her. I love her to death. She's such a wonderful person. She was my favorite professor when I was doing my undergrad. And she was the only one who took these arguments seriously. And that to me is a big problem. It's a big problem because even at the academic level, we're not talking about the philosophical implications of what we're doing to these animals. So of course they're not doing it at the business level, at the people who are, going into a family farm. They're not bothered. They're not even going to college because they don't need to. They already have the prerequisite skills and environment they need to farm. So they're just going right into the farming. And they're never, the philosophical arguments on behalf of animals aren't even being brought up.
Well, I think if anything, it's probably being brought up at the time they're children, and they're being indoctrinated and brainwashed by their parents, just like most of us were. And we talked about this with Ellie a little bit, but I mean, I think back to my own childhood, and we would go fishing like with my granddad and stuff like that, and you just took it like the message on board that you have to do this. It's it's necessary. All the whatever the I forget the other ends are. But basically, I just fully believed and understood that it was absolutely necessary. This has to be done. I need it for my health. And, did I feel good about killing fish? No, it was horrible, but I did it. And, it was just like, okay, well, it's an unpleasant truth. And you just accepted it as normalization. Thanks, Twisted. Yeah. So it's it's normalized, and you're brought up to think that's what you have to do. And I imagine on a farm, especially when it's a multi-generational thing, those kids probably are brought into things a lot earlier, and they do see things. I'm sure some of the most unpleasant parts of it are probably left till they're a little bit older and they've been more kind of indoctrinated. I don't think you would probably start your 3-year-old kid showing them the artificial insemination or the semen collection or whatever. That's not what you would start with, I would imagine. But yeah, you probably, you get them kind of invested into it emotionally and all this kind of stuff. And they're already eating it. They're already consuming it. So that sort of feeds into the whole thing of you like it, right? You like the taste. And it's there's this whole thing built up around it. And it's really hard to get out of that. And
of course, yeah, because to get out of that, you need to question your entire cultural identity. And that was hard for me to do. I didn't grow up in that environment. I grew up in an environment where I cooked a lot and I worked with meat a lot and I loved meat and it was core to my culture and to my personal identity. And it caused me a lot of pain to have to go through the fact that I have to now reconcile what I've been contributing to myself and still try to convince myself I've been a moral person this whole time. Imagine if that's your whole world. And that's
Absolutely.
what it is for these people. And so I sympathize with them. I 100% sympathize with them. That's why I try to be, for most of them, I try to be very delicate and sensitive to the fact that this is hard for them to question their own morality, to question their own cultural identity. Some of them are just assholes, though, and they should be called out for being the assholes they are.
Yep,
and
it's true.
And they care about welfare. They do. Some of my professors were in 4-H, and what they did was raise cattle. That's what they did. That was their real job. Lecturing was, cursory to that. It wasn't what they really were. What they were cattle ranchers. And I would not say these were bad people, and I would not say these were animal abusers. I mean, I could make the argument, though I could make a very strong logical argument based on what abuse means and what animal agriculture entails. I could definitely make an argument that anyone who supports it is an animal abuser, but I understand how loaded that term is for some people and how emotive that term is to some people, so I wouldn't actually call them an animal abuser. These people care deeply about the well-being of their animals, but they also have this false perception that this industry is not only not terrible, but necessary, right? And it's because their identity and their livelihood is built up around it. Like, and then this one woman who was my professor, she was my Animal Science 101 professor, and this is the class where you go through and you learn all the different breeds of animals. And you could just tell when she's talking about these different breeds that she loves them. She loves these animals. She likes how many different varieties they are. She loves that they have different personalities. She loves sharing the pictures of the baby animals she had on her farm. She genuinely loved this stuff. She did not hate these animals. She didn't have malice for these animals. She wasn't just doing this for profit. That wasn't her only pursuit. And it's unfair to say that's the case with farmers, that's all they're concerned about. Some of them, yes. Some of them, yes. All they care about is turning a profit. They don't give a shit about the animal well-being. But that's not true for all of them. I'd even argue that's not true for most of them.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that's why we have to be careful with the kind of loaded words like that, because with using the word like abuse, you're kind of also kind of tacking on intent. So, and I think that's kind of like there's a difference, because if you're unknowingly or unwittingly kind of causing abuse when your whole worldview and everything is just built up around this thing of like, I need to do this. It's necessary. I'm feeding the people, all this kind of stuff, the cultural, the societal kind of norm. Then that's really different than somebody who comes home from their dog and takes out, their frustration on their dog and just beats the crap out of the dog. Like that's intentional. You're abusing. And it's a difference. And I think we do have to be careful with that, because you can potentially miss getting somebody by throwing them off with that word, and then they just shut you down and they don't want to listen anymore. Right. So yeah, I think you have to be careful with that.
So before we even started this, we were talking a little bit about Jonathan Haidt and the righteous mind. And there's this great video by a YouTuber by the name of Will Schroeder, I think it's Will Schroeder, where he talks about Jonathan Haidt and the righteous mind. And then he gives the example of Mr. Rogers deploying Jonathan Haidt's arguments. So Jonathan Haidt has another book called The Happiness Hypothesis, where he talks about this concept called the elephant and the rider. And I don't know if I've ever explained this to you before, but I talk about this all the time. The concept of the elephant or the rider is that psychologically, we humans are both an elephant and a rider, okay? And so in that, the idea is that we think the rider is in control. The rider is our rational side, our logic. We think the rider is in control. And the elephant's our emotional side, right? Really, when you have a big animal like an elephant, do you really think you're in control? Of course you're not. You have this false perception of control, but it's not real. The elephant's really in control, right? So basically he's saying your logic is ruled by your emotion. It is absolutely ruled. The way you rationalize things is ruled by your emotion. This is true for the vast majority of humans. And so when you're talking to someone else who also is an elephant and a rider, you have to first appeal to their elephant. If you don't appeal to their elephant first, then the rider is never going to listen to you. The rider is never, ever, ever going to listen to you. So you have to appeal to their emotional sense of self first. And so then he goes to give the example of Mr. Rogers. So Mr. Rogers, do you know who Mr. Rogers is?
Absolutely. Yeah. I grew up watching Mr. Rogers. So I grew up in the US. I know all of
you did? Okay.
Sesame Street, PBS stuff, Reading Rainbow, like all those classics.
So you grew, okay. All right. I always wondered why your accent's like so like American.
Yeah.
that explains it.
Yeah. I mean, like from the time I was, 6 to, 30 or whatever.
Okay. No kidding. Okay. So for that long. Okay. So all right. So anyway, where were you born? Were you born in Hungary and you just moved back there? Or?
I was actually born in Romania, then moved to the US, and then I moved to Hungary in 2010.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating. So anyway, so then in this video, Will Schroeder uses the example of Mr. Rogers. So Mr. Rogers was trying to get money for his PBS program. This was before he had any money. This was before Mr. Rogers' show even really existed. At this time, Mr. Rogers was doing everything. He was writing the story. He was performing the show. He was paying for it out of his own pocket. Like, he was doing everything. Now, he had help from other people, but really it all fell on Mr. Rogers, right? He was doing it all. So Mr. Rogers goes before this congressman, and this congressman's your typical conservative congressman. He doesn't want to spend money. Now that's not because this guy is immoral and he wants to be a miser and not give money to kids. And Mr. Rogers understood this. It's because this guy thinks that it's not right to take the money out of the American people's pockets and put it towards a program that might not yield beneficial results. He felt like that he was doing the moral thing by telling Mr. Rogers, no, you can't have this money, right? So Mr. Rogers starts off his whole spiel saying, and I would still recommend everyone watch this video. Try to look it up. It's called, what is it called? I'll come up with it. But anyway, so Mr. Rogers is talking to this guy, and he says, like, look, Congressman, I understand that you, like me, care very deeply about children. So right off the bat, he's appealing to the guy's own sense of morality and breaking down the guy's emotional barriers, right? He's talking to the guy's elephant by recognizing and making it clear that he understands this man is a good man and he's not just trying to be a miser. He cares about children. I know you care about children. I know that that's the actual Congress video, and that in and of itself is inspiring, but the Will Schroeder video is called, oh my God, why can't I remember it? I've seen it so many times. If you go on YouTube and you look up Mr. Rogers,
Will Schreiber?
Schroeder. No, it's not Schreiber. It's I'm pretty sure it's Schroeder. So anyway, that's it. Mr. Rogers and the Power of Persuasion.
Okay, cool. So check that out, everybody. Yeah, I've seen the Congress one, and the Congress one is really awesome. I've seen
it's beautiful. It brings me to tears. It's so beautiful. It's like, this was such a beautiful soul. Like, what an amazing human being this was. So Mr. Rogers, that's basically what he does. He just breaks down the guy on an emotional level. He's not trying to manipulate the guy, but he's trying to make it clear, like, you're not my enemy. We're on the same team. And the guy keeps asking questions like, well, who does all this work? What results? And Mr. Rogers is like, oh, you'll be so happy to hear we've had all these wonderful results. I do all the work. I do the writing. I do the acting. I do the film. I do everything. And these kids really love it. And we see that these kids are getting great benefit from this program. And Mr. Rogers does such a good job at first appealing to the guy's sense of his own emotion, and then making the logical argument for why this program works after he broke down the guy's, emotional barriers. That the guy didn't just give Mr. Rogers the money he wanted. He doubled the amount Mr. Rogers was asking for. This guy went from going to not want to give Mr. Rogers any money to giving him double what he was asking for. That's how adept Mr. Rogers was at doing this. The guy was one of the best humans who ever lived. There's no question in my mind about it.
I've seen the thing with him where it was like after the race riots, like in I think it was like the 60s or whatever, and he brought on a guest to the show. It was he brought on a black guy who I forget what it was, but like I think they were sitting out in the garden or something. He had like a little pool, and he was like, it was like really hot out or whatever, and he had his feet in the water, and then he offered the guest the same thing to just like put his feet in because it was like really warm. And so the guy was a military person too, I think, and he took his shoes off, rolled up his pant legs, and kind of put his feet in the little pool too. And I forget exactly how it was, but it was like that was the first time, like this was in like very much in the time of segregation. It was the first time that they saw like on screen like a black person and a white person like sharing the same pool.
Oh wow!
Because it was like there was like a thing where like black people weren't allowed to use the same swimming pools as white people. And and then he I think he even like gave him a towel or something, and they may have used the same towel or something. It was like a big deal. But like of course in Mr. Rogers' like world, it was like just this very nice little pleasant thing. They talked about whatever, and then off the guy went. And but they say like for a lot of people that was actually a very kind of like strong moment that they were like, wow, like black people are just like me, and like
exactly.
Yeah, the guy's awesome. I mean, he was really really inspirational. Yeah.
That story kind of reminds me of that guy, and I can't remember his name, but this was another beautiful human being. I actually think this guy's still alive. It was a black man in the South who started going and hanging out with Ku Klux Klan members, right? And you'd think like, how was he even putting himself in a position where he was around Ku Klux Klan members? But he was finding himself to put himself in a position where and all he was doing was interacting with him and trying to become friends with him. That's all he tried to do was become friends. I'm going to try to become friends with as many Ku Klux Klan members as I can, and then they'll stop being racist. And it worked. He convinced a bunch of people to give up the Ku Klux Klan because he didn't try to do anything other than be friends with them. That's all he tried to do. I wish I could remember his name because this guy's story is fascinating as well. But I mean, that's it. That's all. You got to be friends with these people first. If you come out of the gate saying that you're my enemy, and some people that they're going to be your enemy regardless. There's nothing you can do. They're so staunchly against what we stand for, and they think so little of us that there's nothing we can do. And if you want to engage, I engage with those people sometimes just for catharsis. But if you really want to be effective, you need to find the people with whom you can engage with as a friend, not as an enemy. And if you can engage them as a friend with whom you have a disagreement, then you're much more likely to arrive at an agreement eventually.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And I think also, like we were talking about before we went live, is that in order to not get burned out, I think you really kind of have to mentally be aware of who, what kind of person you're talking to, so that you know how to adjust accordingly. Because if you're allowing yourself to get emotionally invested in every single thing, and all you're dealing with is people like the person who just joined, who I'm probably going to kick off in a second, then yeah, like you can just go crazy. But otherwise, if you just realize like that's the kind of person you're talking to, then it's like it's easier to deal with, and you don't allow it to kind of get your goat.
Right. It's so easy to get carried away, and I allow myself get carried away at times too. And I'm not always at my best. Sometimes well,
that's called being human.
Yeah, right. I'm not always at my best, and sometimes, and this is why like I can still like I don't like Vegan Gains, for example. I love his logical and rational arguments. I don't necessarily love some of the insults he throws at people, but at the same time, I appreciate that he's doing it because it allows people like me to have catharsis vicariously through him, right? I sometimes want to call people absolute fucking morons, right? I just want to throw the book at him with the nastiest, most foul language I can think of, but I have to show restraint. Otherwise, I'm not gonna achieve my goal, and bystanders are gonna say this guy's nuts, right? So I can't. But
how many people do you see that dismiss his arguments out of hand because of his whatever 4 years ago video about stomping babies or whatever, crazy stuff, and they're like, he's nuts. You can't listen to anything he says, and they just dismiss it. So it's very dangerous. I absolutely agree. But yeah, sometimes it does feel like I like watching Jacko Wacko Vegano because he does it in kind of like it's not as harsh as Vegan Gains.
Yeah,
it's still really funny.
Right.
Yeah, it's meant to be funny. But yeah, absolutely. And some people respond well to that too. So like, I wouldn't even ever, say that it's not effective activism. I mean, there's lots and lots of people on Vegan Gains videos who say that they went vegan because of his approach.
Right.
So it's like, I would never really fault him for it, but yeah, I agree. Like, I don't want to use that approach per se because, it's just like, and if you watch him in debates, I think Ellie and I talked about this too, that like, if you watch him in debates, he's the most professional, like super cool.
Oh, he's amazing. Yeah.
I've only seen him lose his cool, like just a hair. Like he never lets it get out of control. So his videos are like one end where he's just really kind of like doing it for the views and kind of he is getting aggression out and stuff. But like when he debates somebody, he's full on professional, like doesn't lose the moral high ground at all.
Well, I know. And people will accuse him of losing his cool during a debate where he's clearly not losing his cool. I'm like, what? It's funny because they came into the debate with this false perception of his personality and how he conducts himself. And so they expect him to act a certain way. And then when he doesn't act that way, they accuse him of acting that way anyway.
Yeah. Well, it's because they've already made up their minds about it before.
Yeah. It's so funny. It's like, give me 1 second, pal. I need to go get my power cord because this is my computer's
okay, sure. I'll read through some comments meanwhile. Oh man. Cool. Welcome everybody. I see lots of new people too. Mr. Earth and other people. Thanks for being on. Conscientious Sarah, nice. Neo-skeptic, no, but I did notice an improved performance in bed, so didn't notice increased penis size, but definitely better performance. Mr. Earth, grieving process was brought up somewhere. The anger many vegans experience. I absolutely think that is legit and that's real. I think a lot of times when people do let themselves get kind of like emotionally kind of carried away on these arguments, it's because they're feeling actual grief, maybe about their own past and stuff too. Sorry, you're back to I was just addressing a comment by Mr. Earth. They were saying the grieving process about how, there is real anger that many vegans experience. I absolutely think that's a legit thing. And
sure.
It's like you really hit on it, earlier. You kind of go vegan, you make the ethical connection, and you realize like there's so much like societal and cultural conditioning that we've been exposed to. And I talked with Ellie about this in the previous stream. Like for me directly, like I realized like, with my own parents even, like there's this very strong disconnect, and there's an underlying stress that still hasn't been resolved to this day, because I think subconsciously they feel like I'm judging them because I don't, I rejected their, raising me or their morals, their views. And it's very difficult. And to come to that kind of conclusion, even as an adult, is very painful to realize like your parents aren't perfect. They don't know everything. Right. And that's something as key and important as like this ethical kind of moral value, that it could have been taught to you wrong. And that it took me this long to see it. Like, it's very painful. So that can also lead to some people being very angry. And yeah, like it is like it's very real. And I find that like with my family, it's actually a lot harder to stay calm and not emotional than it is with strangers, because I'm a lot more emotionally invested with them.
Oh, sure. And I think it's almost analogous to like becoming an atheist. It's not perfectly analogous, but it almost is, because you were raised with these values, and then you get to a point, or at least this was my experience, because I was raised with like a hardcore Catholic church every Sunday, all the obligatory religious days. We were in church, whether it was a Thursday, it didn't matter. If it was an obligatory day, we were in church. Every single Sunday, no question, in church, all the time, doing Bible readings at home, like hardcore Catholicism in my family. And then when I was around 18, I was like, you know what? I think this is all bullshit. I've been taught a bunch of bullshit, and I've had it stuffed down my throat for the last 18 years. And I was mad. I was really mad about that. Now I've been an atheist for over 15 years almost. And I am not mad about it anymore, because there's no point in me being mad about it anymore. I know what I know. I know how I feel about the topic. I know how they feel about the topic. And I know they didn't raise me with that stuff with the intent to harm me in any way. But I felt angry because I felt so lied to. And I think it's the same thing with veganism. You get raised with these values, and then you eventually realize these values are horseshit, and you get angry. You get angry because, and with veganism, it's a lot easier to get angry because there's very real victims as a consequence.
Absolutely. And that whole worldview comes crashing down all at once. And you realize like there's so much to it. And it's not just the food, especially that's really kind of a big difference between somebody who's just following a vegan diet because they want to lose weight or whatever or something. Right. Whereas if you've made the ethical connection, because then you start seeing it everywhere, and it's not just the diet, and you start seeing the clothing and the experiment kind of side of things. Like, so there's just so much exploitation of animals like everywhere that it really is like an all-encompassing worldview that gets kind of shattered. Right.
I know. And Manu actually just made a really good point. He's saying people have no problem saying VG is crazy, but basically these same people will follow Sverige.
Yep. It's absolutely insane. I really like vegan gains. I mean, like I say,
I do too.
I think I really like his science-based approach. I really like how he handles himself in the debates. Those are the most fun things to watch for me. Because like it's, I don't know, like that's where he's like the most calm and poised, and I like the guy. I think he's a good guy.
No, I don't. Yeah, I do too. I don't think I've seen him. I think some of his stories where he talks about like getting into fights with women and stuff like that, like in parking lots and shit like that. Like he's had some weird stories where it's like, bro. But I think he's doing that he's doing that to be sensational because it's funny and it gets some views, and that's fine. That's like a lot of people do that. Like don't. You're making him sound like he's a criminal, but he hasn't committed any crime at all. And then the other thing that I really take exception to is when people say he wanted to film his grandfather dying in order to like promote veganism. No. There was a while back, there was a scourge of people filming people dying of heroin overdoses on Facebook a lot. People filming people dying of heroin overdoses because these people were going to die no matter what you did. The reason why they were filming the people dying over heroin overdoses was not for views. It was to raise awareness about what it's like to die from this shit, how awful it is, and how easily preventable it is if people just get the help they need. Now, addiction to heroin is certainly a lot different than people eating meat, but his purpose was so obvious and so clear. He was not trying to do this for clout. He was not trying to do this to shame his grandfather. He didn't stand there and do that before trying to get his grandfather help. He tried to help his grandfather first. He contacted the proper medical authorities. Then he wanted to film it, not because he wanted views, but because he wanted to raise awareness for what eating an unhealthy diet can cause and how awful a heart attack is. All these people out there saying you only live once, or we're all going to die and all this shit. Yeah, we are all going to die. You don't have to die a terrible, horrible death earlier than you need to just because you didn't choose a healthier diet, right? Yep. And I'm not saying veganism is the only healthier diet you can adopt. But if
and we've talked about this many times on this channel that like you can be extremely unhealthy as a vegan too. So it's like, yeah, let's not conflate the two things. Right. But yeah, there's a million different ways to do a vegan diet, and some of them are horrifically unhealthy. I mean, you can eat nothing but processed foods and be really unhealthy.
Right.
But yeah, it's like I think that's a great point. That like even if he did do something bad, even if you don't agree with the filming the grandfather or whatever, like how long ago was that? And, can we never forgive somebody? Like he's matured a lot. I mean, his videos even have just really changed, and I think for the better.
I do too.
And I mean, I think just like, you have to realize like how young he was when he was doing a lot of that kind of like sensational stuff early on. And like he even himself like has said that his views on things have changed and the way he approaches people have changed. Like the Furious Pete is a good example. Same kind of thing. Like, you just mentioned the other doctor shaming the people with cancer, and look at like,
oh, that guy, hold on. That guy he's no doctor.
Oh, he's not a doctor. Oh, okay.
No.
I thought he was a doctor.
No. He's just some.
Oh, he's just some jerk on Twitter. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But so, I mean, you look at something like that, where, that person's shaming somebody with cancer. And then you look at like Vegan's most recent video about Furious Pete. I think it's a very mature, like, good video. And he still kind of makes the moral points that he wants. He still kind of encourages Pete to, look into the potential health benefits of, not consuming the animals. But he also makes it clear that he's not wishing death on him and doing all this stuff that he was doing before. And it's almost like a non-event, the video, whereas the other ones would have probably got a lot more views if he did another similar kind of crazy, ranting video. But he didn't do that. He chose not to do that. And I think that's good. That shows that he's really like, he's really growing up and like maturing.
Right. And I think he's an asset. Like, I
absolutely agree. Yeah.
I never, like before I went, I was vegan before I got into the YouTube vegan community. So I had heard of Vegan Gains, but I'd never watched Vegan Gains. And then I started watching them closely. And then I started getting involved with Friended. And then I ended up doing I don't know if you remember this, but when Friended debated Vegan Gains, I was the moderator and I did nothing. I literally barely did anything. I just sat there and like just mostly listened because it wasn't really necessary for me to moderate too much. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget this part. I was dying laughing because I at the end of it, and I like Friended a lot, even though I disagree with a lot of his arguments. And I've lost a lot of respect for how he makes arguments because of veganism. I was a big fan of his channel leading up to the whole veganism videos he did. But I remember at the end of the debate, I asked Adam Friended to say, can you just say one like nice thing about Vegan Gains and you know, something positive you think about him? And Adam said exactly what we're saying here. He's like, I think Vegan Gains has gotten a bad rap. I don't think a lot of the things said about him are fair, and I think he does a very good job at trying to make his arguments, and I think he has good intents. And he said some really nice things. And then I asked Vegan Gains to do the same thing. I was like, can you say something nice about Adam? He's like, well, I just think you're a fucking liar. And I was like, I hate to hear what you'd say if I asked you to say something mean about him.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That's too funny.
I was in tears. I thought it was so great. Like, it was just that's so Vegan Gains. Like, he's uncompromising in his convictions. Like, you can't even get him to like pretend to say something nice about someone if he doesn't have anything nice to say about him.
Yeah,
it was just so funny.
He probably would have been more diplomatic now if that happened again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe, but I don't know. I wouldn't want him to change that because that shit was so funny, man. Like, love him or hate him, that was funny. Like, and even Adam was laughing because Adam doesn't take himself so seriously that he can be insulted. You can't. Adam's one of those types of people. You can't insult him because he doesn't take himself seriously enough. You really cannot insult him. Yeah, it's impossible. And I try to do the same way.
That. Is it still up on his channel, or is it like down?
I imagine it is. I don't know. Maybe it is. I don't know. But I imagine it's still up there because I don't think there was anything in that he would have to worry about getting rid of.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I was pretty much the most useless moderator ever. And it's funny because at the end of it, you could see in the chats, everyone was saying I won the debate. It was great. Man. It was so much fun. Oh my God. But yeah, I mean, he gets a bad rap. A lot of these guys, I mean, Ask Yourself gets a bad rap too. And Ask Yourself's another guy who's completely, clearly improved his approach. And I don't think he didn't have, like, one of the things I respect a shitload about Ask Yourself, we talked about this when he first, I don't even know if he remembers this conversation. When he first started his Discord, I tried to make a plea to him to stop calling people morons and stop getting into these arguments where he's like just belittling people and raging against them. And he asked me if I felt like he had a moral obligation to do that. And I said, absolutely not. And then he asked me, do you think how many people do I have a moral obligation to turn vegan? Because my basic argument was you'll get more people to go vegan this way. Your approach will be more effective this way. And he basically said that he asked me, how many people do I have a moral obligation to turn vegan? And I said, absolutely zero. You don't have a moral obligation to make anyone go vegan. That's not your job. You don't have to do that. What you're doing is already great because you are making people go vegan. So, but really, you don't have an obligation to do that. And he's like, okay, great. And then he basically said, like, I am not going to compromise who I am or how I want to conduct myself for anyone else's benefit at all. He's like, this is who I am. I'm going to be true to who I am. And he has like kind of a Howard Rourke view of himself. Like, this is how I am. And I'm not going to change who I am because someone else tells me that I should change who I am. Now, here we are a while later, and I don't think he's compromised on that point at all. But I think he now sees that because he's growing, that it's going to be more effective for him to change his approach. It's going to be beneficial for him to change his approach. And that was kind of the argument I was trying to make to him. And I wasn't doing a great job to make the argument. And I don't want to take any credibility or any credit for him making this change. I hope that's not what it sounds like I'm saying. I don't take any credit for it. But now but from that conversation I had from him, there's been a clear change in how he's conducting himself that I think is for the better. And he did that without having to compromise his integrity at all. He hasn't compromised himself in any way that is saying I am apologizing or retracting anything I said. He doesn't need to. He's just saying, I am going to remove this stuff from my channel because I think it'll benefit my ability to promote my argument, which is what's most valuable to me. And I respect the shit out of Isaac for that. And I always will. Like, I'm
sure some of it, though, and with Vegan Gains too, is directly related to the financial incentive of Google. You know, basically like limiting the swearing and kind of the more extreme kind of content, which they deem to be extreme. I'm sure that's part of it, but I also don't fault anybody for that either. And they could also just be getting more mature as people.
With Ask Yourself, I think he genuinely cares more about the argument than anything else. I think that's his baby. The Name the Trade arguments is his baby, and he wants to nurture that baby and see it fly more than anything in the world, more than he wants to make money off of this. That his priority is not monetary. And I'm assuming this. But from my interactions with him, because I will make a bad argument on Twitter, right? Or even when I first talked to Friended before I did the debate moderating, me and Jack Green went and talked with Friended and another guy. And Friended was asking me to steelman the name the trade argument. And I said, this isn't my argument, but I'm going to do the best job I can at representing it. And I think I did an okay job. But after that, Isaac reached out to me and he gave me a synopsis of how I could have improved my argument, right? And first he asked me, he didn't just do it unsolicited. He's like, hey, I heard you last night on Friended. I thought you did a pretty good job, but would you like some feedback? I was like, absolutely, please. And he gave me this long explanation of how I can improve my argument. And I was like, oh my God, thank you, dude. This is so helpful. Like he's way more philosophically literate than I'll ever be. So like anything he has to give me, any nuggets he has to give me, I'm going to accept. And even still to this day, if I say something in Twitter that he sees as in a great argument, he does me the service of DMing me. He doesn't do this on the Twitter thread in which I'm posing the argument. He does me the service of DMing me and telling me like this could improve your argument. Like that's a guy who cares about arguments. That's not a guy who's trying to do this just for himself.
Yeah, because obviously then he would have like, you know, done a post and just linked you in or something.
Right, exactly. He's not doing this solely for himself and for his, I mean, he's doing it because he cares about the argument. That's what he values. That's what he enshrines above all other things is the argument, not any monetary gain. I hope he makes monetary gain. I absolutely hope. I think he deserves it. The amount of work that kid's putting into this stuff, and I shouldn't call him a kid. That's derogatory. But the amount of work he's putting into this is absolutely worthy of him making an income from this, for sure. No questions asked. And he's not trying to use any cheap tricks to get more viewers at all. Like the things he's doing is for the benefit of the argument. He's not doing these things for more views. He's not doing these things to get more subscribers. He's not doing these things to get more money. And because he's not doing it for those reasons, in time he's going to get all of those things, you know, tenfold, right? Because he's doing it for the right reasons. Yeah. I mean, and again, this is all just my opinion, but he's doing it for the right reasons. Yeah. And I will. And he has, I think,
regardless, like I think regardless of you know, what the intentions are, either for Isaac or for vegans, I think just, you know, the increased like level of maturity and kind of like just the, you know, cleaning up the language basically. I think it does go a long way to legitimizing the message, and I think more people will actually listen. So I just think it's a net positive regardless. And yeah, and then if you still want humor, I mean, you can still do that. And and there are people who do it. Like I said, like Jack was great at it, and other people too. And I think we just need, you know, the more voices, the better. So I think just hats off to everybody who's like doing their bit.
Right, exactly. So cool. And yeah, we have a lot of great assets in this community, for sure. And I think we should celebrate them as much as they deserve to be celebrated. And then if we see them doing something wrong that's condemnable, then we condemn it, but in a way that's sympathetic to the fact that they're just trying to do what they think is right. Right?
Yep.
We extend them the benefit of the doubt that they're trying to do what they believe is the right moral thing to do, the morally correct thing to do, and then we try to help them improve as a community. We don't condemn them. There's so many people whose whole entire YouTube channel, their whole entire YouTube persona is being that, and I'm not going to name names, but it's being that vegan that calls out the other vegans. Right? That's all they do. That's their claim to fame. And to me, that's shameless. I don't respect those people at all. I don't respect those people at all. All the terrible things that people accuse Ask Yourself or Vegan Gains of doing, they still have my respect, because I think, especially Ask Yourself, because he's doing this for the absolute right reasons, right? I don't like the fact that Ask Yourself has in the past gone on tirades of people, calling them morons and saying every insult he can think of in a live stream. I don't think that benefits our community, but that's my opinion. That's my perception. But at the end of the day, the kid, Ask Yourself, still has my eternal respect because of how hard he works and how much he cares about the argument and what his priorities are. And there's very few things he could do to lose my respect at this point.
Well, let's not encourage him. Oh man.
Good point taken.
Yeah.
Point taken.
Some interesting comments there. Yeah. So I didn't really see it, but I saw Michelle Lowe's. Shout out to Michelle Lowe. If anybody's not subscribed to her channel, go check it out. But I guess I saw her video saying how there was a rage quit by Bart K. That's like another one of these people who kind of really falls into the whole category of the people we were talking about at the beginning, where he appeals to kind of like scientific, you know, I mean, he wants to seem scientific. He wants to seem knowledgeable, but then he literally just does kind of the meat heals type of, hand waving and kind of like pickpocketing, trying to get people tricked. And I find that guy's videos incredibly annoying. I can't actually like watch even a whole one. So
no, me neither. Because his approach is awful. His whole approach is awful. His like to the point where his condescending voice is just almost unlistenable. Yep. But last night, so I was around for the debate, or at least I was trying to make myself around for the debate. It was pretty funny because this guy was trying to figure out how to get Discord to work for over an hour. He couldn't figure out how to get his microphone to work, right? So, and then I guess he finally figured it out, and I listened to a little bit of it, but he had this terrible echo, and I could barely even listen to it. And everyone kept saying a doctor's going to come on soon. The doctor is Esmod Tactical, who's like a brilliant guy. He's a Dr. Avi-esque type guy where he can just crush people with the argument because he knows it inside and out. And he's wonderful to listen to because of how knowledgeable he is. And I have nothing but respect for doctors who are going to take their time out of their day from medical practice to talk to a bunch of schlubs about philosophy in a Discord server. Like, that's amazing to me. They spend their time, their free time doing that for our benefit. It's for our benefit. But anyway, I guess what happened, so I was trying to listen to the debate. I couldn't listen to him before the doctor got on, so I stopped listening. And then they said the doctor's going to be back in 30 minutes. So I checked back in about 40 minutes because I had gone off to eat dinner. And Bart had already rage quit, apparently. So I didn't even get to hear the real debate. Like, he rage quit in no time, like record time, I suppose. And so I hope it's getting posted soon, later today, because I cannot wait to hear that.
I mean, I just think like just trying to watch a couple of his videos. Like I said, I couldn't even get through the whole thing. Like you said, the condescending nature, the swearing up and down, just like name calling somebody stupid. Basically, like his argument is like, you're stupid. Like that's his argument. Like there's no like appeal to actual like scientific literature or any kind of like study or anything like that. It's just literal name calling, and I just can't stand to interact with people like that. And it really kind of goes towards what we were talking about, like this the whole like meat heals thing. I haven't even looked through that list of stuff, the resources, but I'll do a video about that just to kind of like show people.
Oh, dude, there's so much stuff in there that's just hilarity. There's like, you could click any random link and you're just like, are they serious? This is what they're saying is scientific resources. And people like one lady, just to bring it all back to the topic here, one girl who I was arguing with tried to say that meat heals is just meant to be a bunch of anecdotes. You can take it or leave it. You don't have to believe any of it. They're not trying to make a truth claim. And I'm like, well, that's obviously not true because the truth claim's right in the URL, meat heals. That's a truth claim, okay? And then she tried to say, well, do you think Yelp is trying to make a truth claim? And I was like, how are you trying to compare it? She's trying to say that because Yelp is a series of anecdotes, and some people might say like, I went to this restaurant and I got sick, therefore that's a truth claim about the restaurant. And I was like, that's fine. Yelp's not making that truth claim. It's not restaurantsheal.com. It's Yelp.com. They're not making that truth claim. And then beyond that, someone else could also leave a review of the restaurant saying it's the best restaurant they ever went to. Like, and they felt great after they went to that restaurant, right? So it's not comparable because I can't write a story to meatheals.com outlining how, like, let's say I don't even have to make up a story. Let's say we had someone who went on a carnivore diet and it wrecked their health. So then they went vegan and that improved their health. They would never publish that story.
Of course,
wouldn't happen. Yeah. So the comparisons these people make, and she blocked me after I pointed this out. Like, we had a long, respectful conversation, and she blocked me. And before she blocked me, I noticed she tagged Dr. Baker and said, I made the mistake of trying to reason with vegans. And then she blocked me. And I'm like, no, you made the mistake of thinking you could reason with vegans, but you're not reasonable. You're the one who's not being reasoned with. Yep. It's just insane how they project this on us. It really is. And it happens to me all the time. And I'm just like, that's projection. I just pointed out that's projection. That's fine. You can project it on me. I don't care. I'll just keep making my argument. I'll keep asking my questions until I get you to either block me, concede, or answer the question. And nine times out of 10, I get blocked. If I push someone into a corner with a question that they're clearly refusing to. Another guy, oh my God, Paul, like if you even saw half my Twitter thread, it's just like, I can't, people are amazed. How do you deal with this? Like this one guy, I was arguing with him about the definition of the term murder and whether or not it's applicable to animals, right? And I don't use the term murder myself because I think it's too triggering and we end up in semantic arguments like the one I was in.
Yep.
I didn't use the term murder, someone else did. I was just defending the use of the term. And I showed the guy the Merriam-Webster dictionary. The Merriam-Webster dictionary has the first definition is to, well, for the verb definitions, not for the noun definitions, but for the verb definitions, there is number one is to kill a human being illegally or unlawfully, I think was the exact vernacular. The second definition was simply to slaughter wantonly. Now, these are two distinct definitions, but this guy kept insisting that the first definition, having specified humans, implied that the second definition must also specify humans, even though it's not explicitly stated. And I had, like, for days, I was trying to explain to this guy, literally days, I was trying to explain to this guy, that's not how dictionaries work. And then I presented him with the argument. I went to the noun versions of the word. So the noun versions of the word, it's the first one has something to do with like the actual act of killing, but they framed it like, I can't remember how they framed it. They framed it in a way that made it a noun instead of a verb. But the third definition was a flock of crows, right? And so I said to him, does the third definition in this example presume this has anything to do with humans, or is it distinct? And he refused to answer the question. He just flat out refused to answer that question. And he kept trying to make the same argument over and over again. And I'm like, dude, you're denying how dictionaries work right now. And this is what, like, they'll do anything to win an argument. And this guy never blocked me, to his credit. I was hoping he would, just so I could be over with it. But like, it's like you are denying how a dictionary works for the sake of winning an argument. Because and he kept saying you're the one ignoring definitions. You're ignoring the legal definition. I'm like, no, I'm not. I accept that both the legal definition and the dictionary definition exist. I'm not saying people should be charged with murder because they kill an animal. I'm saying that you can accurately describe the killing of an animal as murder. That's it. I'm not even saying that I do that. I'm just saying that you can do that if you're so inclined.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is like a psychological, it's like a subconscious response. They're really just not wanting to engage the actual argument. So getting lost in the semantics of it is the way that they can protect themselves from having to basically acknowledge any kind of like, moral consideration that they should be making. Right. It's pretty crazy.
It is really crazy. So
yeah. I'm actually going to have to get going pretty soon because I can hear my kids in the other room.
Yeah, I hear them. They're getting noisy.
But yeah. So, Tim, it was awesome having you on, man. I really appreciate it. It was it was great. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I know there were lots of comments I didn't really get to, so sorry if I missed anything. And thanks everybody for watching. Tim, I hope we can do this again sometime. And
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, man. Kudos to you for all the work you're doing. And
thanks, man. You too.
Yeah, thanks. If anybody isn't following Tim on Twitter, like, definitely do it. There's some, like you said, pretty entertaining stuff and some serious stuff. And maybe another time we can actually talk about the post that you did where you did the financial kind of links between a lot of these. Yeah. The Savory.
No. You're talking about the Animal Ag Alliance. Yeah. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about because the Animal Ag Alliance had this similar post. See, these people don't think that their tactics can be turned against them. They had a similar post trying to make it seem like that all these animal rights organizations are up to some sort of monetary impropriety. So I went through all of their affiliations and I made the exact same post. And before I even did that, I went through all the organizations they tried to condemn. I went through their tax forms. Like, this is how obsessive I get to drive my point home. It's almost a sickness, but it's like, I feel like it's so effective because they didn't ever respond to me. But I just pointed out, like, none of these people are up to monetary impropriety because they're all nonprofits, so I can see their tax returns. But you're associated with the pork checkoff. You're associated with actual, like, for-profit animal agriculture organizations. Can I see their tax returns? Like,
yeah, this post was awesome. It was genius. Yeah. So yeah, we should do a whole other stream where we can talk about that and show kind of the thing, but it's impressive. So seriously, man, if anybody is on Twitter, or even if you're not on Twitter, just go and like look at Ethologos posts and just read through. There's some really great stuff. So yeah, I do have to get going, and it was great. And awesome. Have a great day, everybody. Good weekend. See you guys in the next one.
See you guys.
All right.